My ex let her new boyfriend beat me up. She didn't know he was my employee. The taste of blood was still fresh in my mouth when I realized the guy who just sucker punched me outside Murphy's bar was wearing a company polo shirt. My company polo shirt. Stay the fuck away from Sarah, he snarled, flexing his knuckles like some wannabe tough guy from a bad movie. She doesn't want to see you anymore, got it? I wiped the blood from my split lip with the back of my hand, squinting through my already swelling left eye at the embroidered logo on his chest. Martinez Construction LLC. The same logo I designed 3 years ago when I started the business. The same logo I had printed on 24 shirts just last month for my crew. Sarah stood behind him, arms crossed, looking anywhere but at me. My Sarah, well, my ex-Sarah now, who used to kiss those same lips that were currently bleeding all over the sidewalk. She'd called me 2 hours ago, asking to meet here to talk about getting your stuff back. Should have known it was a setup. You're not even going to stop him? I asked her, ignoring the mountain of muscle in front of me. Really, Sarah? This is how you want to handle things? She finally looked at me, and for a second I saw something flicker across her face, maybe guilt, maybe regret. But then her jaw tightened. You wouldn't leave me alone, Marcus. I told you we were done. That was bullshit and we both knew it. I'd texted her exactly twice since she moved out last month. Once to ask about splitting the security deposit on our apartment, and once to see if she wanted her grandmother's necklace back. Hardly stalker behavior. The boyfriend, whose name I still didn't know, though I'd figure that out soon enough, stepped closer. He was big, probably 6'3" and built like he actually knew how to use the tools I was apparently paying him to carry around my job sites. Marcus, is it? He cracked his knuckles again. Jesus, did this guy learn how to intimidate people from YouTube? Sounds like you need another lesson in hearing the word no. I held up my hands, took a step back. Not because I was scared, okay, maybe a little scared, the guy had 50 pounds on me easy, but because my mind was racing. If this asshole worked for me, I needed to be smart about this. Document everything. Build a case. Message received, I said, pulling out my phone. Loud and clear. What are you doing? Sarah asked, suddenly nervous. Calling my lawyer, I lied, actually opening my camera app. Pretty sure what just happened constitutes assault. Might want to stick around for the police report. The boyfriend's confident smirk faltered. You're not calling anyone. He lunged for my phone, but I was ready this time. Stepped back, kept recording. Got a beautiful shot of his face, that company logo, and Sarah standing right there watching it all happen. Derek, stop, Sarah hissed, grabbing his arm. Derek. Perfect. Now I had a name to go with the face I was definitely going to be looking at in my employee files tomorrow morning. Derek, who apparently thought he could use me as a punching bag and then show up to work on Monday like nothing happened. Derek, who had absolutely no idea that the guy he just assaulted signs his paychecks every other Friday. I pocketed my phone, wiped the blood from my mouth one more time, and smiled despite the pain shooting through my jaw. See you around, Derek, I said. Real soon. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and adrenaline, my hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel every time I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My left eye was already turning a spectacular shade of purple, and my lip had swollen to twice its normal size. I looked like I'd gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight boxer instead of getting sucker punched by one of my own employees in a bar parking lot. Derek. I rolled the name around in my mouth along with the metallic taste of blood. I had 8 guys on my crew right now, and I was pretty sure I knew exactly which Derek this was. Derek Santana, 28 years old, hired him about 4 months ago. Strong work ethic, showed up on time, good with his hands. Made $18 an hour doing drywall and basic carpentry. Never mentioned he was dating my ex-girlfriend, though I guess that wasn't exactly required on his employment application. Back at my apartment, the same one Sarah and I had shared until she moved out claiming she needed space to figure things out, I sat at my kitchen table with a bag of frozen peas pressed against my face and my laptop open. A quick check of my employee database confirmed what I already suspected. Derek Santana, hired March 15th, emergency contact listed as his mother Maria. No mention of a Sarah anywhere in his file. I pulled up the video I'd recorded on my phone, watching it 3 times in a row. The quality was decent despite the circumstances. Derek's face was clearly visible, the company logo unmistakable, and Sarah was right there in the frame looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. The audio was even better. Derek threatening me, Sarah telling him my name, the sound of that first punch connecting with my jaw. This was gold. Pure, legal gold. My phone buzzed with a text from my foreman, Jake Martinez, yeah, Martinez, as in a company name. We'd been best friends since high school, and when I started the construction business, he was the first person I called. Drinks tonight? Jenny's working late and I'm bored as shit. I typed back, rain check. Got jumped by one of our employees. My phone rang immediately. What the fuck are you talking about? Jake's voice was sharp, all business now. Which employee? Are you okay? Did you call the cops? I'm fine, I said, though the throbbing in my face suggested otherwise. And it's complicated. It's Derek. Derek Santana. The new guy. Jesus, Marcus, what happened? I gave him the whole story, the setup meeting with Sarah, the ambush, Derek having no idea who I was, the beautiful irony of it all. By the time I finished, Jake was quiet for a long moment. So let me get this straight, he said finally. Your ex is dating Derek, Derek beat the shit out of you, and neither of them knows Derek works for you. Pretty much. And you got it all on video. Yep. Another pause. Dude, this is either the best revenge opportunity in history or a lawsuit waiting to happen. Maybe both. That's what I was afraid of. Sure, I could fire Derek's ass on Monday morning and probably press charges for assault. But there were complications I hadn't fully considered. What if Derek claimed it was a personal matter unrelated to work? What if Sarah figured out the connection and warned him? What if this whole thing blew up in my face and I ended up looking like the vindictive ex-boyfriend who couldn't let go? What are you going to do? Jake asked. I touched my swollen lip gingerly, staring at Derek's frozen face on my laptop screen. I have no fucking idea. I spent most of Sunday nursing my bruises and going down a rabbit hole that made everything 10 times more complicated. It started innocently enough. I was looking through Derek's employee file again, trying to figure out the best way to handle firing him without opening myself up to a wrongful termination lawsuit, when I noticed something I'd missed before. His start date was March 15th, Sarah and I didn't break up until April 20th. Which meant Derek had been working for me for over a month before Sarah and I even split. That felt like more than a coincidence. I opened up Instagram. Yeah, I know, nothing good ever comes from social media stalking your ex, but my face hurt and my judgment was questionable. Sarah's profile was still public, probably an oversight since she'd been pretty thorough about cutting me out of her digital life otherwise. Scrolling back through her posts, I found what I was looking for. March 22nd, exactly 1 week after Derek's hire date, a photo of Sarah at some coffee shop downtown with the caption, "New friends showed me this amazing place, hot beverage, red heart." The photo only showed her, but there was clearly someone sitting across from her. You could see a masculine hand wrapped around a coffee cup at the edge of the frame. March 29th, hiking with great company, hiking Boot Mountain, a trail photo where she'd carefully cropped out whoever was walking beside her, but you could see work boots in the corner. The same brand of Timberlands we provided as part of our safety equipment package. April 3rd, someone surprised me with lunch at work today, smiling face with heart eyes, posted at 1:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. I checked my records. Derek had been assigned to the Morrison job that week, which was less than 10 minutes from Sarah's office at the insurance company. April 15th, 5 days before she broke up with me. Sometimes you meet someone who just gets it, sparkles, no photo, but the timestamp was 11:30 p.m. I remembered that night. Sarah had come home late, said she'd been out with her coworker Jessica. I'd been watching Netflix on the couch, hadn't even looked up from my phone when she kissed my forehead and went straight to bed. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from adrenaline. She'd been seeing Derek for at least a month before she ended things with me. All those times she said she needed space, needed to figure herself out, needed to focus on her career, she'd been dating my own employee. Someone whose paycheck I signed every other Friday had been taking my girlfriend out for coffee and lunch dates and weekend hikes while I was working 60-hour weeks to keep my business afloat. I called Jake back. "Find anything interesting?" he asked instead of saying hello. She was cheating on me. With Derek. For at least a month before we broke up. Silence. Then, shit, Marcus. I'm sorry, man. The whole thing was a lie. The breakup, the needing space, all of it. She was just trying to figure out how to transition from me to him without looking like the bad guy. What does that change, though? I mean, legally speaking. That was the million-dollar question. Did it change anything? Derek had still assaulted me. Sarah had still stood there and let it happen. The fact that they'd been having an affair while Derek was cashing my paychecks just added insult to injury, but it didn't necessarily give me any more legal leverage. Actually, it might give me less. Now this wasn't just an employee who attacked a stranger, this was a guy who beat up his girlfriend's ex, personal drama. Messy emotional stuff that could muddy the waters if this ended up in court. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm going to find out. What's that supposed to mean? I was staring at Derek's employee file again, specifically at his schedule for the coming week. He was assigned to the Riverside project, a kitchen renovation for some rich couple who were paying us $32,000 for the job. Derek was supposed to be there Monday morning at 7 a.m. sharp. It means Derek Santana is about to have a very interesting day at work. Monday morning came with a revenge clarity that felt better than the strongest coffee. I'd spent most of Sunday night planning exactly how this was going to go down, and by 6:45 a.m., I was parked across the street from the Riverside project with a perfect view of the driveway. The clients, Robert and Linda Chen, were paying us $32,000 for a complete kitchen gut and renovation. It was supposed to be a 4-week job, and we were already into week 2. Derek was the lead on drywall and cabinet installation, good money, skilled work, the kind of assignment I gave to employees I trusted. At 7:03 a.m., Derek's beat-up Ford F-150 pulled into the driveway. I watched him grab his tool belt from the truck bed, the same hands that had split my lip now reaching for the DeWalt drill I bought for the crew last month. He was wearing a fresh company polo, probably had a whole drawer full of them at home, walking advertisements for the business I built from nothing. My face still looked like hamburger, despite the concealer I'd awkwardly applied that morning. The swelling around my eye had gone down slightly, but the bruising had bloomed into a spectacular rainbow of purple, yellow, and green. Professional makeup job, courtesy of Derek Santana. I waited until 7:15, giving him enough time to get settled and start working. Then I walked up to the front door and knocked. Linda Chen answered, a petite woman in her 50s wearing yoga pants and a concerned expression that deepened when she saw my face. "Oh my goodness, Mr. Martinez. What happened to you?" I'd been using Jake's last name for the business since day one. Martinez Construction had a better ring to it than Hartley Construction, and Jake didn't mind. Most of my clients had never seen me in person anyway. Jake handled the initial consultations and I focused on the business side. Work accident, I lied smoothly. Nothing serious. I wanted to stop by and check on the progress, make sure everything's going smoothly with the installation. "Derek's been wonderful," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Very professional, shows up on time, cleans up after himself. We're very happy with his work." The irony was physically painful. I could hear Derek working in the kitchen, the steady rhythm of a drill, the scrape of wood against wood. My stomach twisted with a mixture of anticipation and something that might have been guilt. Might have been. "Derek," Linda called out as we approached the kitchen. "The owner's here to check on things." The drilling stopped. I stepped into the doorway and watched Derek's face go through about 6 different emotions in a span of 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, fear, and finally a pale, sick understanding that his world was about to implode. He was kneeling next to the lower cabinets, drill in hand, surrounded by the tools I provided and the materials I paid for. For a moment, neither of us moved. "Mrs. Chen," I said, not taking my eyes off Derek, "would you mind giving us a few minutes to discuss the project? There are some technical details we need to go over." "Of course." She bustled out, probably thrilled to let the professionals handle their professional business. Derek slowly stood up, setting the drill on the counter. His face had gone completely white under his tan. Holy shit, he whispered. Holy shit, your boss, I finished. Marcus Hartley. Owner and operator of Martinez Construction LLC. The guy who's been signing your paychecks for the past 4 months. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. The guy, I continued, stepping closer, whose face you rearranged in a parking lot 2 nights ago. Derek's hands were shaking now. Good. Marcus, I didn't know. I swear to God, I had no idea. That you were beating up your own boss. Yeah, I figured that much out. But you did know you were fucking my girlfriend while I was paying you $18 an hour, I said, watching his face crumble even further. That part you were crystal clear on. Derek's mouth opened and closed again. Behind us, I could hear Mrs. Chen puttering around in another room, probably giving us space for what she assumed was a normal contractor conversation about cabinet measurements and timeline adjustments. How long? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. How long were you screwing Sarah while shaking my hand every Friday when I handed you your paycheck? Marcus, listen, I never meant for. How long? He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Since the second week of March. We met at Brewster's Coffee downtown. I was grabbing lunch between jobs, and she was there with some friends. I didn't know she was with anyone, I swear. She didn't tell me about you until when? Until I asked her out. She said she was in a complicated relationship, but that it wasn't going anywhere. Said you two were basically roommates at that point. Derek's voice was getting smaller with each word. She made it sound like you guys were already over. That hit harder than his fist had. Sarah had been telling him, that we were basically roommates while I was working 70-hour weeks trying to save money for the engagement ring I'd been planning to buy her this summer. The same ring I'd had my eye on at Morrison Jewelers, $4,200 for a 1-carat solitaire that I'd calculated would take me 3 months to save up for if I cut back on everything else. And when exactly did she mention she was dating the owner of the company you worked for? Derek's shoulders sagged. She never said your last name. Just talked about her ex, Marcus. And you never came to the job sites, and Jake always handled the hiring and the meetings. I never connected. He trailed off, probably realizing how pathetic it sounded. So Saturday night, when you decided to use me as a punching bag, you had no idea you were about to lose your job. I would never have, if I'd known. He was practically hyperventilating now. Marcus, I need this job. My mom's been sick, and I've got medical bills, and rent, and... You should have thought about that before you decided to play bouncer for my ex-girlfriend. Mrs. Chen's voice drifted in from the living room, talking to someone on the phone about tile samples. Normal people living their normal lives, completely unaware that I was about to destroy someone's livelihood in their kitchen. Derek must have heard it too, because he lowered his voice to an urgent whisper. Please. I know I fucked up, but I can't lose this job. Sarah told me you were harassing her, that you wouldn't leave her alone after she broke up with you. I thought I was protecting her. Harassing her. I texted her twice. Twice, Derek. Once about the security deposit, once about her grandmother's necklace. His face went even paler, if that was possible. She said, she made it sound like you were stalking her. Of course she did. Sarah had painted me as the obsessive ex-boyfriend who couldn't take no for an answer, probably told Derek all sorts of stories about how I was making her life miserable. Meanwhile, she'd been the one who called me Saturday night, asking me to meet her at Murphy's. Setting me up for exactly what happened. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the video from Saturday night. Derek's eyes went wide when he realized what he was looking at. You know what this is? He nodded miserably. Evidence of assault. Your face, clear as day. My company logo on your chest. Sarah standing right there watching it happen. I pocketed the phone again. Question is, what am I going to do with it? Derek was sweating now, actual beads of perspiration forming on his forehead despite the cool October morning. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out if there was any way out of this that didn't end with him losing everything. Look, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, what if I talked to Sarah? Explained what really happened. She could tell you that I didn't know, that this was all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I almost laughed. Derek, you sucker punched me in a parking lot. There's no misunderstanding there. Your fist, my face, crystal clear communication. Mrs. Chen's footsteps echoed from the hallway, getting closer. Derek's eyes darted toward the sound, panic written all over his face. He couldn't afford a scene in front of the client, hell, neither could I. This job was worth $32,000, and if the Chens got spooked and pulled out, that would hurt my bottom line just as much as it would hurt Derek's employment prospects. Please, Derek whispered urgently. Just tell me what you want. Money? I can pay you back somehow. Extra hours. I'll work weekends for free. Just don't fire me. The desperation in his voice should have felt satisfying, but instead it just made everything more complicated. This wasn't some stranger who jumped me, this was a guy who'd been doing good work for 4 months, showing up on time, treating my clients well. Mrs. Chen had just finished telling me how professional he was. Mr. Martinez. Linda Chen appeared in the doorway, holding her phone. I'm sorry to interrupt, but my husband wants to know if we're still on schedule for the backsplash installation this Thursday. I forced a smile, despite the way it pulled at my split lip. Absolutely, Mrs. Chen. Derek and I were just discussing the timeline. Everything's looking good. Derek nodded mechanically, his face still pale but trying to look normal. Yeah, the cabinets should be finished by Wednesday afternoon. Plenty of time for the tile work. Wonderful. She beamed at both of us. You know, I've been telling all my friends about your company. The Hendersons next door are thinking about redoing their master bathroom, and I gave them your card. Derek's work has been so impressive. The irony kept getting thicker. Here was a satisfied customer, ready to refer new business, praising the work ethic of the employee I was about to destroy. If I fired Derek on the spot, I'd need to find someone else to finish the cabinet installation, probably delay the whole project, and potentially lose the Chen's goodwill and their referrals. But if I didn't fire him, what kind of message did that send? That employees could assault the owner and face no consequences as long as they did good drywall work. Mrs. Chen, I said, Derek and I need to finish going over some scheduling details. Would it be possible for us to step outside for a few minutes? Of course. I'll be in the living room if you need anything. I jerked my head toward the back door, and Derek followed me onto the Chen's deck like a man walking to his execution. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and the distant sound of traffic on Route 9. Here's what's going to happen, I said, keeping my voice low but firm. You're going to finish this job. Professional, on time, quality work. Mrs. Chen is going to be happy, and she's going to refer her neighbors like she promised. Derek's face flickered with hope. And then you're going to sit down with me and explain exactly how this whole thing with Sarah started. Every detail, every date, every lie she told you about me. Because I'm starting to think there's a lot more to this story than either of us realized. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone again, but this time I scrolled to Sarah's Instagram instead of the assault video. Showed him the timeline I pieced together Sunday night, the coffee shop photo from March 22nd, the hiking post from March 29th, the lunch surprise from April 3rd. Derek stared at the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to something that looked like sick recognition. She told me she didn't break up with you until the end of April, he said slowly. April 20th. But according to this, you two were already dating in March. She said she was waiting for the right time. That you were going through some business stress and she didn't want to make it worse. Derek looked up at me, and I saw something new in his eyes. Doubt. She said she was trying to be kind about it. Kind. Sarah had been kind by stringing us both along for over a month, lying to me about working late while she was out with Derek, lying to Derek about the state of our relationship while she was still sleeping in my bed every night. Derek, I said, watching his face carefully, what exactly did Sarah tell you about Saturday night? Derek's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard, staring down at his work boots. She said you'd been texting her constantly. Calling her at work, showing up places where you knew she'd be. She was scared. Scared of what, exactly? She said you'd threatened her. Told her you'd make her life hell if she didn't take you back. He looked up at me, and I could see the doubt growing in his eyes. She said you'd been drinking heavily since the breakup, that you were getting unstable. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. Sarah had painted me as some kind of unhinged stalker, probably fed Derek just enough fear and sympathy to make him feel like her protector. Meanwhile, the reality was 2 text messages in 3 weeks and me working myself to death trying to forget she existed. And Saturday night. She called me crying Friday evening. Said you'd left a voicemail that scared her, something about meeting at Murphy's to settle things once and for all. She was terrified to go alone, but she said you'd threatened to come to her apartment if she didn't show. The pieces were clicking into place with sickening clarity. Derek, I never left any voicemail. Sarah called me Saturday afternoon and asked if I wanted to get my stuff back from her place. She suggested meeting at Murphy's because it was neutral territory. His face went white again. That's not what she told me. Check your phone. What time did she call you Friday night? Derek pulled out his phone, scrolled through his call log. 7:43 p.m. I opened my own call history, scrolled back to Friday. Look at this. No outgoing calls to Sarah Friday night. No outgoing calls to Sarah since October 8th, 2 weeks ago, when I called about the security deposit. That lasted exactly 93 seconds. Derek stared at both phones, his hand starting to shake slightly. But she was so upset. She was crying, saying she didn't know what else to do. Because she was setting us both up. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Think about it, Derek. She calls you Friday night, tells you I'm threatening her. Then she calls me Saturday afternoon with some story about returning my stuff. She knew exactly what would happen when you saw me there. Why would she do that? Because she wanted you to be her knight in shining armor. She wanted to see if you'd fight for her. I touched my swollen lip. Congratulations, by the way. You passed the test. Derek sank down onto the Chen's deck steps, putting his head in his hands. Jesus Christ. You really didn't know who I was. I had no idea you even existed until Saturday night. And I had no idea you were my boss until 10 minutes ago. We sat there in silence for a moment, 2 guys who'd been played by the same woman in completely different ways. Derek had been turned into the weapon, and I'd been turned into the target, and neither of us had seen it coming. She's been lying to both of us, Derek said finally. This whole time. Looks that way. He looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected, genuine remorse mixed with growing anger. Marcus, I am so fucking sorry. If I'd known. You'd what? Still would have punched me if you thought I was really threatening her. Derek considered this. Probably. But I would have asked questions first. Tried to de-escalate. I'm not usually a violent guy, I swear. But the way she described it, you sounded dangerous. And now I'm wondering what else she lied about. Derek pulled out his phone again, this time scrolling through his text messages with Sarah. His expression grew darker with each swipe. Look at this, he said, showing me the screen. Saturday night, after everything went down. I texted her to make sure she got home okay. The message thread was brutal in its clarity. Derek, 11:47 p.m., made it home safe. That guy won't bother you anymore. Sarah, 11:52 p.m., yes, thank you for protecting me. You're amazing, red heart. Derek, 11:53 p.m., always. Nobody should have to deal with that kind of harassment. Sarah, 12:01 a.m., I'm just glad it's over. Maybe now I can finally move on. She thanked me, Derek said, his voice hollow. She fucking thanked me for beating up my own boss. I stared at the messages, feeling that familiar twist in my gut. Even after watching me get assaulted, even after seeing me bleeding in a parking lot, Sarah had been playing the victim. Painting herself as the rescued damsel and Derek as her hero. There's more, Derek continued, scrolling further back. Wednesday last week, she asked me about my work schedule. Wanted to know which sites I'd be at, what time I got off. Said she was planning a surprise for me. What kind of surprise? She brought lunch to the Morrison job site Thursday. Made a whole thing about it, took pictures of us together. Derek's face was getting redder. But now I'm thinking she was just gathering information. She wanted to know where I worked, who I worked for. The Morrison job. That was the site 10 minutes from Sarah's office, where Derek would have been wearing his company uniform, probably had business cards in his truck with Martinez Construction LLC printed right on them. If Sarah had been paying attention, and clearly she had been, she would have figured out the connection weeks ago. She knew, I said, the certainty hitting me like ice water. Sarah knew you worked for me before Saturday night. That's impossible. She would have said something. Would she? Think about it, Derek. She's been lying to both of us for months. Why would she suddenly develop a conscience about this? Derek was quiet for a long moment, staring at his phone screen. Then he scrolled back further in his message history, stopping at a conversation from 2 weeks ago. Shit, he whispered. Look at this. The messages were from October 15th, 11 days ago. Sarah, 2:17 p.m. Random question, what's your boss like? Derek, 2:19 p.m. Never actually met him. Jake handles all the crew stuff. Why? Sarah, 2:22 p.m. Just curious about your work environment. Want to make sure you're being treated well, Red Heart. Derek, 2:23 p.m. Company's called Martinez Construction but the owner is some guy named Marcus. Heard he's pretty hands-off though. Sarah, 2:25 p.m. Marcus, that's a nice name. Jesus fucking Christ, Derek breathed. She knew. She knew exactly who you were. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Sarah hadn't just manipulated us, she'd orchestrated the entire thing. The concerned girlfriend asking innocent questions about Derek's work, getting him to reveal details about his boss, then setting up a scenario where Derek would assault me without knowing who I was. But why? Derek asked. What did she get out of this? That was the million-dollar question. What was Sarah's endgame here? Revenge against me for some perceived slight. A way to test Derek's loyalty. Some twisted power play where she could control both of us without either of us realizing it. Mrs. Chen tapped on the sliding glass door, making both of us jump. I'm sorry to interrupt, she called through the glass, but there's someone here to see you, Mr. Martinez. A young woman. She says it's urgent. Derek and I looked at each other, the same sick realization dawning on both our faces. Sarah, Derek whispered. She probably saw my truck in the driveway, I said, standing up. Figured out I was here. What do we do? I looked at Derek, really looked at him. 28 years old, good worker, supporting a sick mother, completely out of his depth with a woman who'd been playing chess while he thought they were playing checkers. He made a mistake Saturday night, but it was based on lies Sarah had fed him. The real enemy wasn't sitting next to me on these deck steps. We go find out what she wants, I said. Together. Derek's eyes widened. You want me to face her with you? I want to see what happens when she realizes her little game is over. We walked back into the house like two guys heading to our own execution. Through the front window, I could see Sarah's silver Honda Civic parked behind my truck, the same car I'd helped her pick out last year, co-signed a loan for because her credit was shot from some medical bills she'd racked up in college. Mrs. Chen was hovering by the front door, clearly uncomfortable with the personal drama that had suddenly invaded her kitchen renovation. Sarah stood on the front porch, wearing the blue sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary in June. She looked perfect, as always, hair pulled back in that messy bun that took her 20 minutes to make look effortless, minimal makeup that somehow made her eyes look huge and innocent. Marcus, she said when she saw me through the screen door. Her voice was soft, concerned. Oh my God, your face. Derek told me what happened, and I felt so terrible about the whole misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. That was rich. Derek stepped up beside me, and I watched Sarah's expression flicker for just a split second when she saw us together. If I hadn't been looking for it, I might have missed it, a tiny flash of something that looked almost like satisfaction before her face settled back into perfectly crafted worry. Mrs. Chen, I said, not taking my eyes off Sarah, would it be possible for us to use your front porch for a few minutes? This is a personal matter that won't affect the project timeline. Of course, Mrs. Chen said, though she looked like she wanted to grab popcorn and settle in for the show. I'll just be inside. Doing things. Normal house things. The three of us stepped out onto the porch. Sarah immediately moved closer to Derek, slipping her hand into his in a gesture that looked protective but felt calculated. She was marking territory. I'm so sorry about Saturday night, she said to me, her voice full of manufactured sincerity. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Derek was just trying to protect me because I told him about how things ended between us. How things ended, I repeated slowly. You mean when you broke up with me on April 20th? Yes, exactly. Sarah nodded, squeezing Derek's hand. And I know you've been having a hard time accepting that, but... Funny thing, Derek interrupted, and I heard something new in his voice. Steele. Marcus and I were just comparing timelines. Turns out you and I met on March 15th, didn't we, Sarah? That coffee shop downtown. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. Well, yes, but... And we went hiking March 29th. And you brought me lunch at the job site April 3rd. Derek's voice was getting harder with each date. All of this while you were still living with Marcus. It's not that simple, Derek. Relationships are complicated, and I was trying to figure out. What company do I work for, Sarah? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's mouth opened and closed, her eyes darting between Derek and me. I could practically see her brain working, trying to calculate how much we knew and what story might still work. I don't understand why that matters right now. Martinez Construction LLC, Derek said. Owner and operator, Marcus Hartley. The same Marcus you dated for 3 years. The same Marcus whose face I rearranged Saturday night because you told me he was stalking you. Sarah went very still. The concerned girlfriend mask slipped completely, replaced by something colder and more calculating. This was the real Sarah, the one I'd never seen before, the chess player who'd been moving pieces around the board while Derek and I thought we were playing checkers. You set us up, I said quietly. The whole thing. You knew Derek worked for me, you fed him lies about me being dangerous, then you orchestrated Saturday night so he'd attack me without knowing who I was. That's ridiculous, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. I would never. October 15th, Derek said, pulling out his phone. You asked me about my boss. Asked me what his name was. I told you it was Marcus. Sarah's face had gone pale under her perfectly applied foundation. Derek, you're misunderstanding. Am I? Because right now it looks like you played us both. Sarah's composure cracked completely. The innocent victim mask fell away, replaced by something I'd never seen before, cold calculation mixed with genuine anger at being caught. Fine, she said, dropping Derek's hand and crossing her arms. You want the truth? Here it is. Yes, I knew you worked for Marcus. Yes, I knew exactly what would happen Saturday night. And honestly, you both deserved it. Derek staggered back like he'd been slapped. What the fuck are you talking about? Marcus, you were suffocating me for 3 years. Always working, always stressed about money, always putting that stupid business before everything else. Do you know how many dinners I ate alone? How many weekends I spent by myself while you were at job sites? So you decided to cheat on me. I decided to find someone who actually paid attention to me. She turned to Derek, her voice turning vicious. And you were so easy. The big strong construction worker, so eager to play hero for the lonely girlfriend whose boyfriend didn't appreciate her. Derek's face had gone red. You told me you loved me. I told you what you needed to hear. Just like I told Marcus what he needed to hear for 3 years. Sarah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. God, you're both so pathetic. Marcus with his spreadsheets and 5-year plans, Derek with his, yes ma'am, and let me protect you, bullshit. Mrs. Chen's face appeared briefly in the front window, eyes wide, before she quickly disappeared again. I couldn't blame her, this was better than cable television. So Saturday night was what, exactly? I asked, fighting to keep my voice level. Your grand finale. Saturday night was me getting Derek to prove he'd choose me over some stranger. And getting you to finally see what happens when you don't treat people right. Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. 2 birds, 1 stone. You realize Derek could have killed me, right? Or ended up in jail for assault. Please. Derek's not smart enough to do any real damage, and you're too much of a control freak to let something like this slide without documentation. She gestured at my face. Though I have to say, the bruising is a good look for you. Makes you seem almost interesting. Derek was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. You're insane. You're actually fucking insane. I'm efficient. There's a difference. You destroyed my job, Derek said, his voice shaking with rage. I could lose everything because of your little game. Your job. Sarah laughed again. Derek, you make $18 an hour doing manual labor. This isn't exactly a career setback. You'll find another construction company. The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This was someone I'd shared a bed with for 3 years, someone I'd been planning to propose to. I'd never seen this side of her, the side that could dismiss Derek's livelihood like it was nothing, that could orchestrate violence and then mock both victims afterward. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, Derek's not losing his job. But you might want to worry about yours. Sarah's confident expression flickered. What's that supposed to mean? I opened the video from Saturday night, the one showing Derek punching me while wearing my company shirt. But more importantly, the one showing Sarah standing there watching it happen, even encouraging it. Harboring and inciting violence, conspiracy to commit assault, potentially criminal conspiracy depending on how the DA wants to play it. I smiled despite the pain in my split lip. Plus I've got Derek's text messages showing you knew exactly who I was before Saturday night. Premeditation, Sarah. That's a felony. The color drained from her face. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Sarah's confident mask slipped completely, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. She glanced between Derek and me, probably calculating how much legal trouble she was actually in versus how much I was bluffing. You can't prove I planned anything, she said, but her voice had lost that sharp edge. It's your word against mine. Actually, Derek said, pulling his phone back out, I've got something else. He scrolled through his messages, stopping at a conversation from last Thursday. Look at this, Marcus. The timestamp showed October 24th, 2:43 p.m. Sarah, hey babe, random thought, do you ever get frustrated with your bosses? Derek, not really. Like I said, never even met the owner. Why? Sarah, just thinking about how some people think they can treat others however they want because they have money or power. Derek, I guess. Are you talking about someone specific? Sarah, maybe. What would you do if someone was harassing me and I couldn't make them stop? Derek, I'd handle it. Nobody messes with my girl. Sarah, even if it was someone who could affect your job. Derek, especially then. Some things are more important than money. Sarah's face had gone completely white. Derek, you're taking that out of context. Am I? Because it looks like you were testing me. Seeing if I'd choose you over my paycheck. Derek's voice was getting steadier, more confident. And then you made sure to set up a situation where I'd have to prove it. Mrs. Chen's front door opened slightly, and she peeked out. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a police car pulling up outside. Did someone call them? We all turned to look at the street. Sure enough, a Riverside PD cruiser was parking behind Sarah's Honda, lights off but definitely official business. My stomach dropped. I didn't call anyone, I said. Neither did I, Derek added. Sarah had gone very quiet, her eyes fixed on the approaching officer. It was a woman, maybe 40, with the kind of no-nonsense walk that suggested she'd dealt with domestic drama before. Afternoon, the officer called out as she approached the porch. I'm Officer Martinez, no relation to the construction company, I assume. We got a call about a disturbance at this address. Mrs. Chen stepped fully outside, wringing her hands. I'm so sorry, Officer Martinez. I might have mentioned to my husband that there was some kind of situation happening on my front porch. He may have been overly cautious about calling it in. Great. Now we had an audience and legal complications I definitely hadn't planned for. What kind of situation are we dealing with here? Officer Martinez asked, her eyes taking in my bruised face, Derek's pale complexion, and Sarah's defensive posture. Workplace dispute, I said carefully. Nothing that requires police intervention. Sir, those are some significant facial injuries. When did they occur? Derek and I exchanged glances. The truth was going to come out now whether we wanted it to or not. Saturday night, I admitted. But it's complicated. Officer Martinez pulled out a notepad. I've got time. Why don't we start with names and what happened Saturday night? Sarah finally spoke up, her voice returning to that innocent, victim-like tone I now recognized as pure manipulation. Officer, this is really just a misunderstanding between my ex-boyfriend and my current boyfriend. I'm sure we can work it out privately. Ma'am, when someone has injuries like this gentleman's, it's not really a private matter anymore. Officer Martinez looked directly at Derek. Sir, were you involved in an altercation that resulted in these injuries? Derek's hands were shaking again. Yes, but I didn't know, it's not what it looks like. What does it look like, sir? I could see Derek calculating the same thing I was, how much of the truth to tell, how to explain the insane web Sarah had woven without sounding like we were all completely unhinged. Officer, I said, before this goes any further, I should mention that I have video evidence of the incident in question. Would that be helpful? Sarah's eyes went wide. She clearly hadn't expected me to volunteer the recording to actual law enforcement. Officer Martinez nodded. I'd like to see that, yes. And I think we're going to need to continue this conversation down at the station where we can sort everything out properly. The ride to the police station was surreal. Officer Martinez had suggested we all come in separately to give statements, but Sarah had insisted on riding with Derek, probably hoping to coach him on what to say during the 10-minute drive. I followed in my truck, watching her gesticulate frantically in Derek's passenger seat through his rear window. At the station, they put us in separate rooms. The interview room they gave me was exactly what you'd expect, beige walls, fluorescent lighting, a metal table that had seen better decades, and a lingering smell of bad coffee and human desperation. Detective Ray Kowalski, a heavy-set guy in his 50s with kind eyes and tired shoulders, sat across from me with my phone displaying the paused video from Saturday night. So let me make sure I understand this correctly, Detective Kowalski said, tapping his pen against his notepad. Your ex-girlfriend Sarah Chen has been dating your employee Derek Santana for approximately 7 months, during which time she was also in a relationship with you for the first month of that period. That's right. And you believe Ms. Chen deliberately orchestrated the assault by providing false information to Mr. Santana about your behavior toward her. I don't believe it. I know it. Derek showed me text messages where she was fishing for information about his job, his boss, his willingness to protect her from someone who could affect his employment. Detective Kowalski made a note. Mr. Santana has corroborated those text messages. He's also provided us with additional communications from Ms. Chen that support your version of events. He looked up at me. The question is, what do you want to do about this, Mr. Hartley? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? 6 hours ago, I'd wanted Derek fired and possibly arrested. Now I understood he was as much a victim of Sarah's manipulation as I was, maybe more so, since he was the one she turned into a weapon. What are my options? Well, Mr. Santana clearly committed assault. We have video evidence, witness testimony, and his own admission. Ms. Chen could potentially be charged with conspiracy to commit assault, given the evidence of premeditation and deliberate deception. Detective Kowalski leaned back in his chair. But here's the thing, cases like this get messy fast. Defense attorneys love to muddy the waters with relationship drama, claims of mutual combat, he said she said nonsense. Meaning if you want to press charges against Mr. Santana, it's a slam dunk. If you want to go after Ms. Chen too, it's more complicated but doable. If you want to walk away from the whole thing, that's your choice too. Through the interview room's small window, I could see into the hallway where Sarah sat on a bench, no longer looking like the confident puppet master from Mrs. Chen's front porch. Her perfect composure had cracked completely, her hair was messy, her makeup smudged, and she kept checking her phone like she was expecting someone to rescue her. Can I ask what Derek's saying about all this? Detective Kowalski glanced at his notes. Mr. Santana is taking full responsibility for the assault. Says he was manipulated but doesn't want that to excuse what he did. He's also provided us with Ms. Chen's complete text message history, including some conversations we hadn't seen before. What kind of conversations? The kind where she explicitly discusses teaching your ex-boyfriend a lesson and making sure you understand there are consequences for treating people badly. Pretty clear evidence of premeditation and malicious intent. I stared at the paused video on my phone screen, Derek's fist connecting with my jaw, Sarah standing in the background with an expression I now recognized wasn't shock or fear, but anticipation. She'd wanted to watch me get hurt. Had probably enjoyed every second of it. Detective, what happens if I press charges against Sarah but not Derek? Kowalski raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. Why would you want to do that? Because Derek was manipulated into attacking his own boss based on lies. Sarah orchestrated the whole thing. She's the real criminal here. The DA might have trouble with that logic, but it's your call. He made another note. What about your employee situation? Mr. Santana mentioned he's worried about losing his job. I thought about Derek's face when he realized who I was, the genuine horror and remorse in his voice. Then I thought about Sarah's casual dismissal of his livelihood, $18 an hour doing manual labor, like his work meant nothing. Derek keeps his job, I said. But Sarah pays for what she did. The detective's pen stopped moving. You sure about that? Keeping Mr. Santana employed after he assaulted you could complicate things legally. How so? Defense attorney could argue that if you thought Derek was really dangerous, you wouldn't keep him around. might undermine the assault charges against Ms. Chen. Kowalski leaned forward. Look, I've been doing this for 23 years, and I've never seen someone get played quite this thoroughly. But the law doesn't always account for emotional manipulation the way we'd like it to. A knock on the interview room door interrupted us. A younger officer poked his head in. Detective? Ms. Chen is asking to speak with Mr. Hartley. Says she wants to apologize and work things out. I almost laughed. Even now, even sitting in a police station facing potential felony charges, Sarah thought she could manipulate her way out of this. Tell Ms. Chen that's not happening, Detective Kowalski said. Mr. Hartley, you don't have to speak with her if you don't want to. Actually, I said, standing up, maybe I do. 20 minutes later, Sarah and I sat across from each other in a different interview room, this one with a recording camera and Detective Kowalski observing from the corner. Sarah had tried to fix her makeup, but she still looked like a shadow of the confident woman who'd orchestrated Saturday night. Marcus, I know you're angry, but we can figure this out, she said, reaching across the table like she was going to take my hand. I pulled back. This whole thing got out of hand, but it doesn't have to ruin everyone's lives. Everyone's lives. Or just yours. Derek doesn't deserve to lose his job over this. His mother's medical bills. Now you're concerned about Derek's mother. Funny, because 4 hours ago you called his job $18 an hour doing manual labor like it was nothing. Sarah's composure flickered. I was upset. People say things they don't mean when they're emotional. No, Sarah. That was you being honest for the first time in months. I leaned back in my chair. Tell me something, how long were you planning this? The whole thing with Derek, the setup Saturday night, all of it. I wasn't planning anything. It just happened. Bullshit. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the screenshots Derek had shared with the detective. October 15th, you asked Derek about his boss. October 18th, you asked him what he'd do if someone was harassing me and it might affect his job. October 24th, you straight up asked if he'd choose you over his paycheck. Sarah stared at the phone screen, her face going pale again. That's 3 weeks of setup, minimum. 3 weeks of turning Derek into a weapon aimed at me. I locked my phone, set it on the table. The only question is why? What did you get out of watching me get beaten up by my own employee? For a long moment, Sarah didn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and hollow. Do you know what it's like to be invisible, Marcus? To live with someone for 3 years and feel like you don't exist. So this was revenge. This was me mattering for once. Me having power over something instead of just waiting around for you to notice I was there. Her eyes flashed with anger. Derek paid attention to me. Derek made me feel important. And yes, maybe I enjoyed watching you finally face some consequences for being an emotionally absent boyfriend. Detective Kowalski cleared his throat from the corner. Ms. Chen, I should remind you that this conversation is being recorded. Sarah looked directly at the camera, and for the first time since I'd known her, she seemed completely, terrifyingly honest. I'm not sorry, she said. I'm sorry it came to this, but I'm not sorry Derek hit you. You needed to understand what it felt like to be hurt. The silence in the interview room after Sarah's confession felt like a physical weight. Detective Kowalski stopped writing, his pen frozen halfway through a sentence. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder. Ms. Chen, Detective Kowalski said carefully, did you just admit on record that you orchestrated an assault because you wanted Mr. Hartley to understand what it felt like to be hurt? Sarah's mask of innocent victimhood had completely shattered. What sat across from me now was someone I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, and absolutely unrepentant. I said what I said. My phone buzzed with a text message. Jake Martinez, dude, where are you? Mrs. Chen called the office saying there were cops at her house and Derek looked like he was about to throw up. Everything okay? Everything was decidedly not okay, but in ways I couldn't have imagined this morning. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady, Derek could have seriously injured me. What if he'd hit me wrong and I'd ended up with permanent brain damage? What if I'd fallen and cracked my skull open on the pavement? She shrugged, actually shrugged, like we were discussing the weather. But you didn't. You're fine. I have a concussion, 3 stitches in my lip, and my left eye is swollen shut. You've had worse injuries falling off ladders at job sites. Detective Kowalski set down his pen and stared at Sarah like she'd grown a second head. In 23 years of police work, he'd probably seen a lot of things, but casual sociopathy during a recorded confession was apparently new territory. Ms. Chen, do you understand the legal implications of what you're saying? I understand that Marcus is probably going to press charges because he can't stand the idea of me having any power in this situation. Sarah looked directly at me. Just like he couldn't stand the idea of me having friends, or hobbies, or any kind of life that didn't revolve around his construction business. That hit like a slap. What are you talking about? I never stopped you from having friends. No, you just worked 70 hours a week and made me feel guilty every time I wanted to go out because you were too tired or too stressed about the Morrison contract or too busy calculating payroll. I was building a business, Sarah. I was trying to create a future for us. You were creating a future for yourself. I was just supposed to sit quietly in the corner and be grateful for whatever leftover attention you had energy for. Detective Kowalski cleared his throat. This is probably something for couples therapy, not a police station. Sarah laughed bitterly. There's no couple left to counsel, detective. Marcus made that clear when he chose spreadsheets over me for 3 solid years. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jake, just talked to Derek. He's freaking out about losing his job. Says you caught him doing something but won't tell me what. Call me back. I stared at the message, thinking about Derek sitting in another interview room, probably terrified that his life was about to implode because he trusted the wrong person. Then I looked at Sarah, who was watching me with something that might have been satisfaction. You really don't care that Derek could lose everything, do you? Derek is a grown man who made his own choices. Based on lies you fed him. Based on feelings I helped him discover. Derek wanted to be my hero, Marcus. He wanted to matter to someone. Sound familiar? The comparison stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Derek had been desperate to prove himself worthy of Sarah's attention, just like I'd been desperate to prove myself worthy of, what? Success. Financial security. Some impossible standard I'd set for myself. The difference is I never asked Derek to assault anyone. No, you just made it inevitable. Detective Kowalski stood up abruptly. I think we're done here. Ms. Chen, you'll need to remain available while we determine what charges to file. Mr. Hartley, we'll need a formal written statement, but you're free to go. As we left the interview room, I caught a glimpse of Derek through another doorway. He was sitting with his head in his hands while a different detective took notes. He looked smaller than he had this morning, defeated in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. Outside the police station, the October air felt sharp and clean after the stale atmosphere inside. Detective Kowalski walked me to my truck, his expression thoughtful. Mr. Hartley, I have to ask, are you really planning to keep Mr. Santana employed after all this? I looked back at the station, thinking about Derek's genuine remorse, his sick mother's medical bills, his desperate need to believe he was protecting someone who actually cared about him. Yeah, I said. I think I am. 6 months later, I was standing in a Henderson's newly renovated master bathroom, watching Derek install the final piece of crown molding with the precision of someone who'd found his calling. The work was flawless, clean lines, perfect joints, the kind of craftsmanship that turns a $15,000 bathroom remodel into a $25,000 showpiece. Looking good, Derek, I said, running my hand along the smooth finish. Mrs. Henderson's going to flip when she sees this. Derek stepped down from the ladder, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Thanks, Marcus. I've been watching YouTube videos on advanced trim work. Figured if I'm going to be your lead installer, I better earn it. Lead installer. That promotion had happened 3 months ago, along with a raise to $24 an hour. Derek had more than earned it, not just through his improved skills, but through the way he'd handled everything that followed that insane October day at the police station. Sarah had pled guilty to conspiracy to commit assault in February. 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a restraining order that kept her at least 500 feet away from both Derek and me. She'd also been fired from her job at the insurance company after the story made the local news. Apparently, employers don't love having employees who orchestrate assaults against their ex-boyfriends. Derek had insisted on paying for my medical bills, even though I'd told him it wasn't necessary. $347 for the emergency room visit, stitches, and concussion evaluation. He'd handed me cash in exact change, his hands shaking slightly as he counted out the bills. It doesn't make us even, he'd said. Nothing makes us even. But it's what I can do. The real healing had happened slowly, through working together on job sites, through Derek proving day after day that he was exactly who he'd seemed to be, a good guy who'd been weaponized by someone smarter and more ruthless than either of us had realized. Marcus. Derek's voice pulled me back to the present. I wanted to tell you something. I looked up from the tile work I'd been admiring. What's up? My mom's cancer is in remission. Full remission as of last week. Derek's smile was brighter than the bathroom's LED lighting. The doctors say she's got a good prognosis, maybe years of good health ahead of her. Derek, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you both. The thing is, Derek continued, setting down his tools, I couldn't have kept her in treatment without this job. Without you giving me a second chance I definitely didn't deserve. So I wanted you to know, you didn't just save my career that day. You saved my mom's life. My throat tightened unexpectedly. You saved your mom's life by being a good son and a hard worker. I just signed the paychecks. No, man. You chose to see past the worst thing I'd ever done and find something worth keeping. That's not small, Marcus. That's everything. Mrs. Henderson's voice echoed from the hallway. Mr. Martinez. Could you come see the finished product? I want to take pictures before my husband gets home. As we walked toward the main bathroom, Derek nudged my shoulder. By the way, Jake told me you're finally dating someone. The teacher from Roosevelt Elementary. Amanda, I confirmed, unable to keep the smile out of my voice. 3rd date tonight. She's making dinner. Good for you, man. You deserve someone who appreciates what you've built here. I looked around the Hendersons' house, the perfect trim work, the satisfied clients, the thriving business that now employed 12 people including Derek. Sarah had been right about one thing, I had chosen work over our relationship. But she'd been wrong about why. I hadn't been building a business. I'd been building a life, one that could weather unexpected storms, support the people who depended on it, and create something meaningful beyond just profit margins. Derek had become part of that life in ways I never could have predicted. Sometimes the best employees come from the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes the people who hurt you end up teaching you the most about forgiveness. And sometimes, when someone lets their boyfriend beat you up, the real victory isn't revenge, it's discovering you're stronger than you knew, and building something better from the wreckage they left behind.